agricultural land and land near critical infrastructure or military bases.
And what are some of the key ways that lawmakers are working to disarm the CCP's takeover tactics here?
Well, the main laws, there have been 19 laws passed so far that deal with the purchase of adversarial nations purchasing agricultural land. That's been the main thrust so far. But some of those bills also include provisions limiting or restricting, different companies that are tied with China, for example, or other foreign adversaries from buying land close to military facilities. There was a case, all this kind of got started actually in Texas. There was a case several years back where a military officer, former military officer with the CCP, bought a huge Texas ranch very close to one of our Air Force bases in Texas, supposedly to put up a wind farm and then feed that electricity into the Texas grid. That was stopped by, actually at that point, that was stopped by Texas Governor Greg Abbott, but then legislation was later, passed to bolster that.
Now, in a recent report in the Epoch Times, you described several instances of the communist regime asserting pressure on or otherwise seeking to manipulate lawmakers here in the U.S. Describe one example for us.
Yes, there was, it was actually two examples I think that stood out. One was Texas Senator Kolkhorst. She's the one that introduced that bill, a couple years back to stop the purchase of agricultural land. And to hear her describe what she went through was pretty eye-opening. She said she was called a racist 100 times a day. There were organized campaigns where, hundreds of, she did not think that they were American citizens, but there were, mixed in, of course, I'm sure, but there were people that were organized going to her offices and to the offices of others there on, in Austin to basically, swarm their offices, get in their face with TV cameras and as though they were journalists, and they had to actually leave, force them out of their offices. Very aggressive tactics. And in one situation in Louisiana, apparently when the Louisiana legislature passed this measure, there were people there, observers, protesters, that threw things at the state legislators.
Wow, what a sight that would have been. From food security to biological weapons to critical infrastructure, your report outlines many areas under threat or even compromised by the CCP here in the U.S., and you mentioned some of those earlier as well. Where do you think are the greatest weak points in our defense?
Well, there was one thing that was brought up that I don't hear many people talking about, and that was these transformers, electrical transformers for, power plants. These transformers apparently take, like a year to get. There are about 400 of them, I guess, throughout the United States that have, that have been manufactured and have some Chinese components to them. And the experts that I listened to there at that Austin conference were talking about that is a serious problem because it takes so long to get them that if something happened to them, if they were taken out, then, the entire grid system of the United States could be taken out. So there's things like this I don't think that, a lot of state lawmakers are looking at or thinking about, or even the American population in general. But these type of things you can imagine trying to do without electricity and not having anything to replace it, on the horizon.
Yeah, this could potentially impact every person in the U.S. If any of these defenses are truly targeted. Any advice for Americans listening who may want to do something to effectively shore up U.S. national security against the threats posed by the Chinese Communist Party, or help on that front?
Yes, actually, Senator Kolkhorst was talking, and afterwards the panel discussion, people in the audience were able to talk, and there were a lot of Texans that were concerned at that meeting, that spoke up. And what she said is, make sure you let your state legislators know that you are aware of the problem and that you support these bills. one of the main reasons she's of course proposing a similar bill this legislative session as we speak. And one of the main reasons that this bill is getting priority now was because so many people called in after the bill was killed last time, and constituents and saying, what is going on here? We support this. We do not want China or Chinese businesses and companies buying up our agricultural land or to have facilities near our critical infrastructure. So, I know you hear that a lot, but that is one of the main things that people can do if they're concerned about this, and hopefully they are.
For sure. Well, a critical example there of your voice does count. So thank you so much for this information and your report. Darlene Sanchez with the Epoch Times. The Justice Department says a Customs and Border Protection official allegedly tried to defraud the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA. The DOJ yesterday charged a director-level employee with scheming to fraudulently obtain disaster aid. Serena Baker Hill of Detroit is also charged with lying to federal agents. According to the charges, Baker Hill applied for FEMA assistance, claiming her house had been damaged in the 2023 Detroit floods. FEMA approved the aid after an inspector verified the damage, and Baker Hill said the home was not livable. The aid was meant to cover rent and essential utilities, but the DOJ now says Baker Hill's bank records show none of that money was used for rental, hotel, or utility expenses. Charges go on to say that, in fact, Baker Hill and her husband continued to live at the home after receiving the funds. The complaint says the alleged crime was discovered when the FBI was investigating her husband for drug trafficking. Baker Hill was later interviewed by the FBI. She said she had never engaged in illegal activity or defrauded the U.S. government. A program focused on clear by farmers. The agriculture
relationship always. Mark Rutte, now he's Secretary General of NATO and doing a fantastic job. Everybody, every report I've gotten is what a great job he did, and I'm not at all surprised when I hear it. We had to support him, and we supported him as soon as I heard the name. But he was a fantastic prime minister, and he's doing a fantastic job. An even tougher job. Which is tougher, being the prime minister of Netherlands or?
This job is quite tough.
I would think this is a little
but Dutch politics is also brutal. So.
Yeah, but this is pretty tough.
Yeah.
You're doing good. We're going to be discussing a lot of things. Obviously, we'll be discussing what's happening with respect to Ukraine and Russia. At this moment, we have people talking in Russia. We have representatives over there, Steve Witkoff and others. And they're in very serious discussions. As you know, Ukraine has agreed, subject to this, what's happening today, to a complete ceasefire, and we hope Russia will do the same. Thousands of people are being killed, young people usually, mostly young people. We were just talking about it. Thousands of young people are being killed a week, and we want to see that stop. And they're not Americans, and they're not from the Netherlands for the most part. They're from Russia, and they're from Ukraine, but they're people. And I think everybody feels the same way. We want it to stop. It's also a tremendous cost to the United States and to other countries. And it's something that would have never happened if I were president. And it makes me very angry to see that it did happen. But it happened, and we have to stop it. And Mark has done some really good work over the last week. We've been working together. And he's done some really good work, so I'm very happy about that. We'll also be talking about trade and various other things, and I think we'll have a very, very strong day. We're going to have lunch afterwards, that'll go, and then we'll see you all later. But Mark, would you like to say something?
Yeah, but first of all, thank you so much, Mr. President, dear Donald, again for hosting me, and but also for taking time in Florida a couple of weeks after you were re-elected.
That's right.
And of course, our phone call a couple of weeks ago, and I must say, Trump 45, you originated the fact that in Europe, you're now spending, when you take it to aggregate, 700 billion more on defense than when you came in office in 2016, 2017. But that was Trump 45. But when you look at Trump 47,
It'll be hard to tell.
what happened the last couple of weeks is really staggering. The Europeans committing to a package of 800 billion defense spending. The Germans now, potentially up to $500 billion extra in defense spending. And then, of course, you had Keir Starmer here, the British Prime Minister, and others, all committing to much higher defense spending. We're not there. We need to do more, but I really want to work together with you in a run-up to the The Hague Summit to make sure that we will have a NATO which is really reinvigorated under your leadership, and we are getting there. We also discuss defense production because we need to produce more weaponry. We are not doing enough. And not in the US, not in Europe, and we are lagging behind when you compare to the Russians and the Chinese. And you have a huge defense industrial base. Europeans buying 4 times more here than the other way around, which is good because you have a strong defense industry, but we need to do more there to make sure that we ramp up the production and kill the red tape. So I would love to work with you on that. And finally, Ukraine. You wrote to that book, as you said, all the killing, the young people dying, cities getting destroyed. The fact that you did that you started the dialogue with the Russians, and the successful talks in Saudi Arabia now with the Ukrainians. I really want to commend you for this. So, The Hague is my hometown. I love to host you there in the summer and work together to make sure that will be a splash, a real success, projecting American power on the world stage.
What Mark is saying is when I first went to NATO, my first meeting, I noticed that very few people were paying. And if they were, they weren't paying their fair share. There were only 7 countries that were paying what they were supposed to be paying, which was,
Even worse.
Could be even worse. But there were just very few countries that were paying, and even the paying, it was at 2%, which is too low. It should be higher. It should be quite a bit higher. But you had Poland, and I remember Poland was actually paying a little bit more than they were supposed to, which I was very impressed with. They've been actually terrific, and some of the others. But most of them weren't paying, or they were paying very little. And I didn't think it was appropriate to bring it up there, but I said it's going to be brought up at my next meeting. And my next meeting, the first meeting, you want to give them a little break. The second meeting, it began, and I was able to raise hundreds of billions of dollars. I just said, we're not going to be involved with you if you're not going to pay. And the money started pouring in, and NATO became much stronger because of my actions and working along with a lot of people, including Mark. But they would not pay for other presidents, and I don't think other presidents even knew that they weren't paid. I asked first question, has everybody paid up? And literally, I mean, they told me 7. You could be right, it could be 3, but that makes it even worse. But they just weren't paying. And I said, no, I won't protect if you're not paying. If you're delinquent or if the money isn't paid, why would we do that? And as soon as I said that, I got a little hit from the press because they said, oh, gee, that's not very nice. But if you said the other, nobody would have paid. And the money started coming in by the billions. And hundreds of billions of dollars flowed into NATO, and NATO became strong.
Yeah.
And you remember that. Your predecessor, who I thought was a very good man.
Absolutely. Yes, Stoltenberg. He sends his
He was terrific. Stoltenberg, Secretary General. And he made the statement that when Trump came in, the money started coming in like we never saw before. Hundreds of billions, actually probably close to $600 billion came in. And NATO became strong from that standpoint. And now we have to use it wisely. And we have to get this war over with, and you'll be back to a much more normal life. And maybe we're close. We're getting words that things are going okay in Russia, and it doesn't mean anything until we hear what the final outcome is. But they have very serious discussions going on right now with President Putin and others, and hopefully they all want to end this nightmare. It's a nightmare. It's a horrible thing when you look. I get pictures every week. They give me the pictures of the battlefield, which I almost don't want to see. It's so horrible to see young people laying arms and legs and heads laying all over the field. It's the most terrible thing that you'll ever see.